you're their network until they actually get a network. And even after they get a network, my motto or my tagline is no one sells a home like a mom, because I treat most people like family, is they'll still call on me. Like something will break. What do I do? I'm having, is this school better than that school? What do you think? And where's the kids going to go? And, or kind of like the swim lessons, those kinds of things, the parks and recs. What do you know? What should I do? And those are the kinds of things, because my kids have gone through the school system here all the way through college and MBA.
Welcome to the JWell CFO Show. I am your host, Jeremy Wells, and with me today is Pam Santoro. Pam, thank you so much for being on the show. Introduce yourself to us. Tell us about your business and what you're doing.
Well, I'm a realtor with Berkshire Hathaway, and I've been in the business. This is my 16th year, and
wow.
I got in the business because a friend of mine owned her own brokerage up here. She was Remax at the time, and she said my computer science and my business background would fit right into this. And by the time I got my license and everything, she was diagnosed with breast cancer, and so I never ended up working with Patsy, but she was really a good mentor to start me off. And I love Berkshire Hathaway. It's a great company, and they've got all kinds of wonderful tools from Moxie on down for us to use to help our clients.
Gotcha. Well, let's take a step back real quick, because mentorship is something that, often comes up in this show. So, what made her a good mentor, and, how did that impact you in getting started in the field?
Well, she was very successful, and she knew what she was doing. And I knew her from the church, and basically just the fact that she put me in the right direction. And that's, in this business, people don't realize how much money is involved just to start this business, and what to do, and kind of going out, and you have to do farming, you have to do networking. And I like the person-to-person thing more than the farming thing, but that's just me personally. She thought too, because we had moved around the country. We went from outside of the city of Pittsburgh to Kansas City, Missouri for a couple of years. And we've been in Atlanta for 25 years. So it's kind of like, according to Atlanta standards, we're pretty much almost natives.
Yeah.
You know how that is. Yeah. But the relocation aspect, when we were on the plane moving to Kansas City, my daughter was 5 years old, and she turned around and said to me, "Mommy, if we have to get new friends, do we have to get new aunts and uncles and grandpas and grandmas too?" And I wanted to die, and you're sitting there trying to not do this. So anyone that's moved here to the Atlanta area, I know how they feel. And I've had clients that have, the only person they know in town is me, and they've come to my house for Thanksgiving dinner. I mean, I've had more clients for Thanksgiving dinner. You're their network until they actually get a network. And even after they get a network, my motto or my tagline is no one sells a home like a mom, because I treat most people like family, is they'll still call on me. Like something will break. What do I do? I'm having, is this school better than that school? What do you think? And where's the kids going to go? And, or kind of like the swim lessons, those kinds of things, the parks and recs. What do you know? What should I do? And those are the kinds of things, because my kids have gone through the school system here all the way through college and MBAs and all that stuff, that, you know it, and you can help them. And that's what keeps our Atlanta market up, is our schools, especially up here in the North Atlanta area.
That's an interesting point, because, when you're not just helping people buy a house, right? Like, you're really changing the course of their life, because you're helping them determine, but really in a way, through your advising, you're determining what school their kids are going to go to, and, what their mortgage payment is going to be. So how their month to month finances are going to look like, right, who their neighbors are going to be, right? There's a lot of just everyday life things that are going to be determined by what house you wind up getting them in.
And I tell them, like, there's a lot of things you cannot ask a realtor that we are not going to answer, but that we can't. But I'll tell them, I'll sit in this neighborhood or you can come back to it, especially like it's a hot market right now. You don't want to do that too long up here now. But
Right.
if you see the neighbors while you're looking at a house, I'll sit in the car and tell them, go and talk to them before we go to the next house. If this is really your house and you think this is your neighborhood, go and ask them what they like about it. They're going to tell you. The neighbors will always tell you what they love about their neighborhood. And that's really how you get it. It's like you have to, if you're between two houses and two schools, well, go visit those two schools and you're going to get a feel for what they're like, what their community inside the building is like. And that's what you've got to help them with.
Yeah. Yeah. So, 16 years is a little while to be doing this. It seems like a lot of people jump into it and then, back to having that early setup, they're not really sure what it is. And so they either get out of it pretty quickly or, they wind up like you where they've done it for a while. So what else besides a mentor, obviously that's a big part of it, but what else besides a mentor makes the difference between people who don't really commit to real estate? Maybe they just do it on the side a little bit and then they, don't really take it seriously versus those that make a career out of it and make it a lifelong
it's the company that you join. Do you understand? I think it's the company that you're with. What kind of a support system do they have? What kind of marketing do they have? Do you have to do it all on your own? Like, I've never been with anyone that we had to do it on our own. And like the Berkshire, you've got a marketing staff, a marketing department. You've got all kinds of hands-on things that you can use online. If you do need to pull something together, it's really quick to do it yourself. But if you want to hand it over to the marketing guy, we have a new guy, Rod, and you just give it to him and say, I'm thinking of this. Can you make it look good? Can you do this for me? And he does it. And that's really what I think makes it easier for someone if they're going to go into this. Our company has a lot of perks. So that's what you're going to want to have. You're going to want to have the support, the perks. They have a lot of resources for, like, when you first get your license, you have to do the post licensing, after you are with a broker. If you're getting good training in those first 25 hours, and then the office staff is good, and you have kind of a plan. And it's really, if you have a plan, it's kind of like they tell you, if you don't have a plan, it's never going to work. But if you have a plan, you can follow it and get there. It's a process. And real estate is doing the same kind of processes over and over correctly. And there's always like a hiccup. Like, I have been dealing, one of the niches that I have is a senior market group, and I have a huge networking in the senior market. You learn, like, does something need probated? Who's the attorney you're going to deal with and point your clients to? Like, I know several really good attorneys. One guy is extremely connected in Fulton County, and it's been a breeze. He's gotten it done in the time you needed to be able to sell the house for someone. Because the older people that have lived here for a while, in the early 90s, they were still deeding your property tenants in common and not joint tenant with right of survivorship. So some of the people they've lost a spouse, and then they'll go to sell the house and realize they can't sell it because they never probated a will, and the spouse's name is still on the will. And that's, you have to have someone that can do those kinds of things to get that done.
Yeah. So for people who, don't understand what that is, which I'm going to imagine is the vast majority of the public. So what, just right there in terms of, this is something that obviously a lot of married couples, the first time they buy their house, the last thing they're thinking about is one passing away or anything. So what goes into this piece of real estate that's co-owned by a married couple when one passes? What are the complications there, and how can you avoid those?
In tenants in common, it means that, say, my husband's name is Tony. Okay, so Tony has half of the house and I own half of the house. I dropped dead before Tony. Well, Tony still owns his half of the house, but mine has to go through my will. And if it says it goes to Tony, then it goes to Tony. If it says it goes to my children, then it goes to my children, and Tony owns his half, and the children would own the other two, that kind of a thing.
Interesting.
And
Okay.
and so what it is they were deeding things that way for a long time. And then they went to the joint tenants with right of survivorship. So Tony and I own the house together, and we looked at when the first client that had this happen to me, we went back and talked to the attorneys that I deal with, Weissman, all the time, and they looked at my deed, and sure enough, it was tenants in common. So it cost me $100 or $200, whatever they charged me, and we signed it in front of them, filled out the form, and they changed the deed into joint tenant with right of survivorship. Because I explained to my husband, I took an 82-year-old down to the courthouse downtown Atlanta because the attorney had a death in the family. So he sent me with all the papers and his cell phone as he was leaving for out of town to go to Charlotte, where the family member passed away. And I have the 82-year-old, and we're down there. And every time they sent me somewhere and said they wouldn't do it, I would just call Glenn, and he would talk to them, and they would stamp something and send me to the next place. And we went up and down the building quite a few times. But for $12, we got the paper that we needed to close on Monday. But he was going to do that himself until this person passed away. So it's like not normally something your realtor chaperones someone to do, but you want it to be an easy and smooth thing. So I always tell people that if you can, look at your deed. Now they're only doing the right of, joint tenants with right of survivorship unless they're not married. Or if, say, two friends buy a house, maybe you're thinking you're in a committed relationship, but you haven't really committed yet. Mm-hmm. So you're buying this before, and they'll do that, the tenants in common for that, because you're not married yet.
Right.
And so then, you have to look at it that way.
Interesting. So it's just the distinction between whether your heirs are going to get your half or your spouse that you co-own the house with is going to get the half.
Significant other, the one that you want is going to get it. Get it.
Interesting. And obviously that can turn into some problems. Yeah. If it's not set up the way that way, because all of a sudden now you're roommates with your spouse's children. that could get interesting.
Sometimes the children don't like you. Right. It's like,
especially if there's been second marriages or something along those lines. Yeah.
And they, and so you don't want that to happen. And so that's just a thing. But in my 16 years, the one time I did not sell a house, but I put the couple back together. Every time they were already divorced, every time I had a buyer and we had helped the guy, I even showed him how to get wallpaper off the walls, which one of those do-it-yourself projects. My sister's really good at that. She should have been a decorator. She can look at anything and fix it or figure out how to do it. Well, to take wallpaper off, it's the black and white newspaper, and you put it in hot water and you kind of smush it on the wall from the baseboard on up in one panel at a time. After 10 minutes of this soaking on the wall, it pulls off better than all that stuff you get at Home Depots and Lowe's. Right. And it doesn't damage the drywall, because I had my master bath was not, they must have not sized the drywall, the drywall correctly before they put the wallpaper on it, and it ruined. My husband had to remud our bathroom. But I showed the client how to do this. I went over to the house. Yeah. I said, you can't take a picture of me like this in my capri pants and the whole thing. I showed him how to do one section, and then his son came home from college and he fixed it all. It was a whole new house when his wife moved back in. He said, you're going to be upset with me because we're not going to sell the house. I said, I knew it, because no one moves back in a house after they're divorced.
Right.
They don't do this, but she would do it every time I had a buyer.
Interesting.
It was very interesting.
Now it's funny because, I hope my wife doesn't hear that, because she spent, and this was about 15 years ago now, but her parents moved into a new house that the whole house was wallpaper, and she spent a whole month one summer before going back to college peeling all the paper off the walls. Yes. And her payment from her parents for that was they bought her an iPod
That's it.
way back when. Yeah. So for a month, she peeled wallpaper and got an iPod out of the deal. So
Well,
I think they also, paid a lot of her college expenses too.
well, we hope
but
so.
yes.
We hope so.
Right.
But if she ever has to do it again, just tell her to call me and I'll explain how to do it easily.
Will do. No, that's an interesting tip. Yeah. So you mentioned your, I guess, niche, being on the senior market. So how did you get into that, and what is distinct about that as opposed to the rest of real estate?
Well, it's a different market. It's more you're holding their hands. Like the last one that I did, we put the house up for sale. The woman was 100 years old. She just went into, her son, who was 70, finally talked her into going to senior living. And it took him, 3 years to talk her into this. But she was getting like that she really needed to be out of this house.
100 years old, she was still living on her own.
Yeah, so she went to senior living. We did the contract, and it was supposed to go live, and she passed away before it did. And part of the reason it didn't go live while she was still alive is because we were trying to get all the antiques out of the house. We couldn't, it wouldn't show well because of the antiques. Because young people, they were going to buy this house, most likely. It was a ranch, not a huge one, but in one of the best school districts up here. And a young person's going to walk in and it's going to feel like grandma. And that's not what you wanted it to be. I just wanted it to be empty. So that was part of the problem, is getting the stuff out so we could clean the carpets and have the house cleaned and all that stuff. Well, then because she passed away, the power of attorney he had, it passes away with the person. So it's only good. He could only help his mother when she was alive. Okay, so then once that happened, we had to rewrite the contract in the estate.
Yep.
You had to get a copy of the will, put it in the files, everything like that. And the will had to be probated, but you had to rewrite the whole contract for the estate, and then it went live. So we did it twice.
Wow.
And then in that process, he was in Alabama, which was 100 miles from here, and he had no internet. So we would have had the house under contract in like a matter of 4 hours, okay? Because it was like they were lining up outside of it to look at it. And but we had to wait till he was going to drive here from Alabama to sign the contract. So I kept the 12 or 15 highest ones, the better contracts, printed them all out. And we sat, and I met him down at the probate court because he had to drop those papers off that the attorney said to drop off so that we could get this all done so that we could close once we had a contract. Because it takes 30 days about to go through the probate process. And, but that was the hard thing. He had no e-sign, and he had to come in person, or you had to do it in person. And then right before the closing, he fell and broke a rib or two and was in the hospital in Alabama. This is 2 days before the closing because he was insisting on coming back here to do it all for his mom in person. And we had to get a mobile attorney to go to the hospital in Alabama and get all the documents signed and then send them overnight back to the attorney so that it would close on Friday for the woman. He said to me, well, can't she just wait? And I said, she has to get out of an apartment with X amount of time. And because the mother had lived in the house for about 22 or 23 years, the carpets needed replaced, stuff like that. We priced it appropriately because he didn't want to do the flooring and the other stuff that, would have gotten him a higher price.
Yeah. The necessary things to get a buyer willing to go for it. Yeah, absolutely. Right. So I think, at any one of those steps along the way, I think a lot of people would have just said, this is not worth it. Somebody else can deal with this.
Well, you just have to have a little patience with them, and they're very nice to you and they treat you well and you treat them well. It's the patience level. And it's different from, I do all different levels. That's not my only thing. I mean, I do first-time home buyers and I do a lot of move up. And right now the market is so hot for the move ups that you kind of pick your house out and put an offer on it with the contingency that yours is going to sell.
Right.
And because you will be homeless. If your house is in really good condition and you put it up for sale, anything under 500,000, it's going to go around here. The builders are only they're especially in my area. Like my son lives 4 exits from me, north of here, because a first-time home buyer couldn't buy around here. You couldn't afford it.
Yeah.
And the builders are they start at about 500 minimum, but most of the builders now are doing 775 and up. And that's, how many kids can start off like that? We couldn't. When my husband and I, we couldn't have done that.
Right. Yeah, no, that's interesting. So, on that spectrum, I guess, right? If you're dealing with, seniors that are moving into their communities or, maybe even passing away in the last home they own versus new buyers that are just getting started, how do you try to make those connections, or are there any connections to make? I mean, is it possible to say, I've got these clients moving out of this house, I've got these clients looking for a house? Is it possible to connect those? Or, are the price ranges and the locations just so far apart that it's hard to just make those connections?
It is, but really it's when you're listing a house, you're really representing the seller. So you're more, your advantage really is to market the heck out of it and put it out there to every agent and do it that way. When I first started this business, I'd do both sides, but I really would rather not, just because people are very litigious and I would rather have them represented. So that they don't feel like I'm, because if it's my listing, I'm really supposed to be taking care of that seller. That's my first priority. And the buyers, though, when you're looking at them, they're everywhere, and there's a lot of industry up here, a lot of tech stuff up here in the north end of Atlanta. The film industry is below the city of Atlanta. A lot of it's still in the middle of the heart of the city. Tyler Perry, you've got all those studios down there in Peachtree City and Fayetteville, that area, that they're doing that stuff. But up here, there's a huge tech corridor in Alpharetta that they had done 20 years ago. They made it all high fiber. So we have a lot of geeky kind of people that were like me. I'm a computer science business major, so I understand them, and you can deal with it that way. And a lot of people can afford something more. Maybe they just don't want to go to the top of their budget because you don't want to be house poor. Right? No one wants to eat hot dogs for the rest of your life or ramen noodles like you did in college. You don't want to do that kind of stuff. So you want to have, if you want the house, you still want to have to be able to furnish the house. And live like you want.
Right. Absolutely. What do you see as the trends then? Because there's a lot of controversy. There's a lot of discussion over, with the younger generation, with, student loan forgiveness, with, salaries aren't high enough, that wages are too low, that, wages haven't tracked inflation, all these kinds of things. Do you hear a lot of that with your younger clients that are looking for homes?
And I often talk to the sellers about that too, because the younger clients, because they have the student loan debts, and one of the presidents, I believe it was one of the Bush, they changed the student loans that they could increase. They used to only be about 2%. And now I know they can go up to 6.9, and you can buy a house for 3.5. So it doesn't make sense in that respect. I think the interest rate, if they had kept the interest rate steady, these kids, the students could actually pay them off better. But you try to explain to a seller that the reason you want them to put the house in order and to, do the flooring, do the painting and all that stuff is because those young kids cannot afford the expense of, it does need new carpet. They can buy the house and they can afford the mortgage with their debt, because it's going to look at their debt ratio that they cannot afford to upgrade it.
Right.
So whatever
Right.
they're going to
Yeah.
buy, it needs to be in a good neighborhood, and it needs to be, it shouldn't have to have a roof. It shouldn't have to have new windows.
Yeah.
It should
Right.
be solid. And that's what you're looking at. And I always tease them that I'm not an inspector, but if I walk around and feel like this is a money pit, well, it probably is a money pit, because my husband is the maintenance guy in our house, you know, and he handles if anything big happens. But if I can see that it's wrong, then to me, if I can see the roof looks a little wavy, if we're walking around and you know, you feel like you're walking kind of downhill in a house and you wonder why, and then you get down to the basement and you realize, well, those the supports don't look correct. They're cinder blocks and they're not a beam, or you know what I mean, something like that. Under
Something
the house,
just off. Right.
Something's off.
Well, it's interesting because, you know, you're talking about houses where, you know, the owners have lived in it for a while, you know, a few decades or whatever, and they haven't done that major structural upkeep, or, you know, they haven't replaced things that have a lot of wear and tear, like you're saying, the carpets, the fixtures, those kinds of things. And the idea of, well, I'll just have the new buyer pay for it, right? It's a little crazy, because it, you know, unless you are there are very few markets out there where you can take something that is almost completely used up and put it out there and expect top price for it, right? You know, I mean, you would not take a car that should be sitting, you know, at the junkyard and put it on the market for the same price that somebody else could go buy a new car for, right? You wouldn't expect that. And so why do you get to take your house that needs 10, 20, you know, 30, $40,000 worth of, and, you know, I'm not saying, you know, putting in granite countertops. I'm saying, like, you know, carpet, like the floor that you're going to live on, right? Like, and expect somebody to want to buy it without those things, and not be willing to, you know, cover any of the cost of that, knowing that, you know, most of your buyers out there are barely going to be able to get through closing, much less, you know, come into the house with if
there's one more hiccup, and like up here, and I'm pretty sure, because I've had clients come from Florida, with the subdivisions and the HOAs, there's initiation fees, and you have to know if you're going to pay it, if the seller's going to pay it, how that works. Something like that can throw them into, you know, total panic mode. That it could be anywhere from $600 to $1,000 or more for one of these initiation fees, and you know, that's part of the closing package too. And
that's also something, you know, you bring up HOAs. That's something that growing up I had never heard of, right? And we lived in subdivisions. We lived, you know, in town, you know, and I had never heard of it. I mean, there were subdivisions where, you know, they were building new houses, so you had to buy the lot and then you build the house on it. But that was it. You bought the lot and you were done. There was nobody else to pay. And, you know, I remember the first time my wife and I bought our house, it's been about 5 or 6 years ago now, and we were in Texas at the time, and we could not find a neighborhood that did not have an HOA, new or old, it didn't matter. And the idea of, you know, having to pay, you know, on top of the mortgage, on top of the insurance, on top of the taxes, and now I've got to pay even more to this organization that I don't know what they are, what they're doing, who these people are, right? It's a tough pill to swallow, and it feels like something that, you know, my parents and grandparents' generation, they didn't have to deal with that. So it's very difficult to have that conversation about, no, but you've got to add another $100, $200, maybe even $300 a month to your payment for the HOA as well.
To cover that. And the idea is there's good and bad to the HOAs. The HOA means that, you know, you can't leave your garbage cans out in front of your house all the time. You cannot paint it purple with pink stripes and an orange star on it. You can't do stuff like that. Because one of them, this happened a few years ago, Dunwoody is really built up in Atlanta, and that was like, they still have great schools and great everything. But there was a farmer. It used to be the farms. That was the farms 40, 50 years ago in Atlanta. And one guy still owned one. And they would pick on him, a gentleman, because of his roosters and things, all the neighborhoods that were around in the subdivisions. And he kind of got a little upset, and he painted it the barns and all these different colors. He painted it really crazy. And they were right in the center of everything was built up. I mean, it was
Oh,
down
man.
toward the King and Queen buildings down in Atlanta. It's like, but you'll get that because
Right.
they upset him.
Yeah.
And the reason I tell people is unless you're going to have a business that you're going to have a trailer or something parked on your own property, or maybe your boat or whatever, if you don't need if you don't need to be out and have a big property, the reason that the HOAs were popular here is because most of them were the swim tennis, because you really need that. It's hot here in Atlanta. And that's where if you move from like another state like we did, we met everybody at the swimming pool or the tennis courts. You met them with the swim team. The kids went to the swim team, and you met the world just at the swim team at the swimming pool. But it kept the values of your house up because somebody, whoever the management company was, went around and wrote little notes that, okay, you better put mulch back out, or you better cut that tree or shape it. There's something, you know what I mean, wrong.
Right,
Paint your front
right.
door. Little things.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, so let's shift gears a little bit, and back to, so yeah, obviously real estate, for whether you're at that point in life where you're getting out of it or just getting into it, there's a lot of issues, a lot of changes, and so definitely get in touch with a good realtor, good experienced realtor, that they can help you navigate all of these things. So for those out there who are just thinking about getting into this field, what, over your 16 years of experience, you talked about mentorship, you talked about finding the right office to get with, what other recommendations, what other advice do you have for somebody that's just thinking about getting into this field?
If someone's afraid to talk to somebody, then this is the wrong business. Okay.
Right.
You have to be able to talk and discuss the contracts and the house and those kinds of things. You need to feel comfortable with yourself, and then think about what is my sphere. Like if I were moving to Florida, I would have to start and create this whole network back over again that I have here in Atlanta. You would have to join the chamber, join the local business association. If you go to church, do something, volunteer in the church so that they know who you are, and then start small with advertising, or pick a neighborhood or two and talk to someone that's been in the business before you pick a neighborhood that you're going to market. So see what the turnaround is for the neighborhood. Don't pick one that no one's ever going to move out, that no one's moving out of, or you can't tell that, you need one about 5 or 7 years old that they're starting to either go to the next house, either move up, move down, something. And that's kind of what you're looking for. But you need to realize that it's going to cost you X amount of money. And if you have to live on this money, you better get very good at going after expires and FSBOs and, all that stuff, because the networking is amazing. I deal mostly in referrals now because I have a good network. And my past clients will call me up, the first time buyers that I've had, or the ones that I've had, we've moved from the townhouse into a regular house, they'll still refer me. When I've watched them go up from their first house into the first and second and third houses, they'll tell Johnny or Susie to call me. And I've had other clients that their children, they were getting married, and the one was a police officer, and she got an agent from online, and that person kept waking her up in the morning when she told them that she was a police officer and she worked the night shift, so that at 7 in the morning she was going to sleep, and then she would get up at 2 o'clock so she'd do whatever they wanted her. But they woke her up all day. So her parents said, why didn't you just ask us and call Pam? And so I got him a house. But you have to be willing to bend with the client. And if you can't, then I have other people that I can refer. If I'm out of town or something, you have other people. And that's what the good offices are for. The good brokerages are for, that you have other people that you trust, that you call up and say, I can't do this. Can you take my client out? And they do. And you cover for them and they cover for you. And those are the things that you have to work on, the relationships.
Awesome.
It's a people business. It's not just
Yeah.
pretty houses.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, excellent. So if we've got somebody interested in Berkshire Hathaway or somebody that's looking to buy or sell up in the North Atlanta area, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you, Pam?
Well, my website is my name, www.pamsantoro.com, and that'll get you to the Berkshire site, or they can call me 678-656-6627. And my office is right in downtown Alpharetta, 33 South Main Street, and we're on the second floor. We have a whole second floor. It's glorious. But most of the time I work from my home office, and then I'll meet clients over there.
Gotcha.
But you know,
Good deal.
I'm available, and I have all the stuff online that you can find me with.
Awesome. Well, we'll definitely put a link to that website on there so that people can find you. Thank you so much, Pam. It's been really interesting. And, you know,
Thank
it's
you.
always interesting to, you know, I tell people that realtors really have the pulse of the community and really the economy, you know, because you're out there talking to everybody, people just getting started looking for homes, people late in life that are looking to get out of homes, and everybody in between. So, you know, find a good realtor, establish a relationship with that person, even if you're not actively looking for a house, know some good realtors in the area, stay in touch with them, and good deal. But it's been really great having you on the show. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. Take
And
care.
for those of you listening and watching, I am Jay Wells. You can find me at Jay Wells CFO across all the social media. This has been the Jay Wells CFO show. Thank you very much.
Thank you.